Okay, hello everyone. So we are now with our new lesson called travel documents. No, so on this lesson, we're going to study the importance of having the right documentation for your travel, as well as the repercussions of when we allow our passenger to board the flight without proper documentation. For the case po siya ng passenger service agents. Now, for the case naman po ng travel agents, okay, so normally we don't issue tickets. Nevertheless, the passenger have a complete passport or a visa secured. So yun po yung ating protocol. That's our standard operating procedure. Now, in an event that the passenger is insisting that she or he should be issued a ticket, so ang proseso namin is we ask the passenger to sign a waiver form. So acknowledging the liabilities and of course forgoing us, the agent, in any event that the visa was denied. Kasi proseso kasi if the passenger have issued the ticket already, they have bought the ticket, but they failed to get the visa, so wala tayong magagawa diyan kundi i-refund yung ticket kasi hindi nila magagamit. So that's the logic there. So now, it's really important for us as a future passenger service agent as well as a travel agent to know the different travel documents that your passenger might be required. Okay. So now, this is a very basic discussion of it. So if you are now in a business of travel agency and airline, or particularly the passenger service agent, so medyo we're going to study this lesson for about 2 days for you, for your orientation ninyo, and also for the visual inspection of the documents. Kasi maraming documents, no? So syempre, it's very important for you to recognize the looks and of course the important silent points of the documents. Okay, let's proceed. Okay, so what we're going to discuss here is, of course, highlight the importance of travel documents and what are the basic travel documents that is required for the travel. Okay, so we have this basic documents. Okay, so what, why matter, or what's the concern all about? Again, as I highlighted, there are the repercussion of non-compliance for the case of airlines, okay, and for the case of the passenger, and for the case of your travel agent. For the case of the passenger, normally it would be an inconvenience. The passenger is would need to fix the documentation at the airport given a short amount of time before his or her flight. And another might be possible, of course, the passenger might be uh, uh, will be will be escorted to the waiting room at the immigration for before improper documentation is fully complied. So these are the convenience that the passenger might be experiencing without complete documentation. Now, for the airlines, so the airlines will be liable for that event, that an event that they have brought in undocumented or improperly documented traveler into a foreign territory. So for that, the airline will need or will suffer the curtailment or cancellation of their flying rights to that destination. Okay? So it's really mabigat siya. Next, yan. For example, the Manila to Hong Kong flight was suspended because of the infringement of certain um, protocol, particularly the health protocol that was not followed. So the flight was, or the right that was temporarily suspended. Okay, so that's very controversial news during this pandemic. Next, another possible scenario here is your aircraft might be impounded, meaning to say the aircraft will be grounded in case that there is improper documented alien. For example, if you failed or improperly declare that certain individual might be carrying certain disease, or incomplete yung kanyang vaccination, the airline might be impounded, meaning to say hindi kayo pwedeng lumabas, nasa loob lang kayo ng eroplano. And of course, it will uh, take a lot of headache and cost for the airlines to to put the remedy for that. Next, of course, this is quite common as well. The airline is fines by the airport and the country involved. And this one is really serious. The entire crew and the passenger will be quarantined. And of course, we know that based on our experience, that quarantine is really expensive. It's not really fun, even though you're staying in the hotel, but someone or a business might need to pay this. Okay, so what are the basic travel requiremements for travel? Now, the reason or the rationale is that when you're traveling domestic, meaning to say you're traveling within the territory of the country, so meaning to say Manila Cebu, Manila Davao, or Davao Legazpi, this is within the boundaries of the Philippines, or for example, Alaska going to Chicago, Chicago going to New York. So these are within the boundaries of the US territories, airspace. So it's considered to be a domestic flight. Now, for case of the European Union, for example, Paris going to Italy, so that is considered to be an domestic flight, considering these two countries are part of the European Union. Okay, so before we acknowledge that as an international flight, but since there is a treaty or declaration that European member states or the EU member community states are treated as one territory. So they are only issuing what we call the Schengen visa because it is considered as one territory. So meaning to say the Schengen visa issued in Italy is valid whenever you don't, whenever you visit Spain. So it's the same visa. So basically that's the agreement there. Now, that's what we consider domestic. It's the travel purely within the airspace of a country or a group of country, considering EU. Now, for international travel, the requirement is a passport. So it's a basic requirement. Now, in the absence of passport, there are other documents that you can use. But of course, there are certain conditions and restrictions for that. Now, normal conditions and 99.9%, or meaning to say, most of the time, passport is required for international travel. Okay? There are only certain circumstances that you are allowed to use passport substitute documents. Now, later we'll discuss that. No. So now, what is a passport? Okay, so passport is basically a document that authorizes or confirms two things: your identity and your nationality. So two things. A passport is an evidence of your identity and your nationality. So meaning to say, your nationality is established whenever you present a certain passport. Your identity is established whenever you present a passport. Now, in the case of the Philippines, we can have two passports, right? Because we have this law, what called the Dual Citizen Act of the Philippines. Meaning to say, besides the Philippine passport, you can own or have American passport to other forms of passports because of cases that your father was an American and your mother is a Filipina, or let's say you happens to be born or you happen to be born in Europe or in Japan or in US, and of course by the virtue of their law you are granted the nationality of the country. Kaya nga ako may mga kliyente before, no, na they want or they wish to have or to give birth to their sons or daughter in United States of America. Bakit? Kasi whenever that child was, was pinanganak sa Amerika, the law assumes that child is a US citizen, regardless of the nationality of the parents. So that's the presumption of the jus soli. Okay, jus soli, or the rights of the soil. Now there are certain countries like Saudi Arabia. Of course, kahit anong gawin mo doon, if you are not related or your father is not a Saudi citizen or your mother is not a Saudi citizen, so of course, kahit anong gawin mo doon, you're still a Filipino. Because of that, they don't have that kind of law. So that is, they only establish nationality by the virtue of the blood, or just sanguinis. Okay, so that's the principle behind that. Okay, now another thing, another trivia here is that, of course, in airline business, we are very careful for accepting expectant mother. Why? Because the aircraft is part of the territory, or what we call the extraterritoriales of a certain country. For example, the Philippine Airlines. The Philippine Airline is part of the territory of the Philippines. Okay, because it carries a flag. So it's an extension, it's a moving extension of the territory of the Philippines. So therefore, if a certain carrier, like for example, American Airlines, and then they accepted you in their flight, and you are an expectant mother, and suddenly you gave birth to your son, automatically, by virtue of the operation of the law, your son will become a U.S. citizen. So that's how critical is that. And of course, practicality purposes. We don't want to hassle ourselves, especially the flight stewardess on board for that. Okay? So that's part of our, that is parang in advance to our discussion for those passenger that needs special assistance for your special advanced service requirement for the PSA training natin. Now, for travel agency, you should be also be careful for that, because we cannot just issue tickets. Okay, we have to be mindful that tickets should be issued, number one, with the corresponding documentation. Okay. Number two, tickets should be issued based on certain, I mean, one of that will be the physical condition of the client. For example, if your client is obviously pregnant, so you might ask the passenger that, ma'am, sir, do you have, or ma'am, do you have a certificate coming from the airline physician that you're authorized to fly? Because if there's no certificate coming from the airline physician, the PAL or the airline could reject your valid booking despite it's valid. Yeah, despite you have already paid that, because it's under the terms and condition of the air ticket. Okay, so we have to be careful for that. Okay, so going back to the discussion, we have the passport. So passport is the essential document for all international travel. So that is the requirement. So basically, you have this passport. Before, we have three types of passport according to the manner of its issuance. So the first one is the manual passport. Basically, that's what we call the backlash passport, because you can easily backlash the first page and then tamper it with another page. So that's quite dangerous. Now they have updated that using the optical machine readable passport, but because forgery is a technology that also updates itself. So the forger have already know how to create that passport. So they have already improved and update themselves. So now it's about time to update the passport now. So now we have the only valid passport that we have, the biometric or biometric or the electronic passport, because there is a microchip embedded to your passport. Okay. So your passport acts as a repository of your biodata information. It also includes your fingertips and finger finger details, right? The fingerprints. Okay. Now, going back, the passport is embedded with a microchip. So you have to be careful, or you have to secure the passport, because your passport is valid for 10 years. So you should be able to secure your passport, and please don't put it in a microwave, of course, common sense. And please don't put it in heat and exposure to the elements, because of course, even though it's made of a paper and combination of polymer, it's still practically subject for the elements. Of course, the microchip inside will be somewhat affected. And lastly, I have a client of mine who have exposed the passport to strong magnet. Let's say they have played, or the children have played it with the magnet sa rep. So basically, the details of the passport was already sterilized. So meaning to say the machines could not read that details. So avoid exposing the passport with magnets. Really, it really destroys the microchip. Okay. So how to book passport appointments. Of course, if you're planning to apply for a passport, of course, you need to secure appointments sa DFA. Now, tip lang, if you have employee, a government employee, and your name is the same surname with them, you can probably ask them to apply for a passport and accompany them so that you can also apply your passports. So because we have a courtesy lane in DFA, as well as for the seniors and PWT. Okay, so let's move forward. And also, please be mindful, the most common mistake that I myself, I have encountered that during my junior years as a travel agent is I failed to notice the expiration of the passport kasi wala, inisyo ko lang yung ticket, I forgot to look sa expiration niya, expired na pala, and the client itself, he's not aware of the expiration. I just check the name of the passport and check the name of the ticket. It's exactly the same, but I failed to check the expiration. So of course, a lot of inconvenience. Okay, let's go. There are three types of passports. So three types. So meaning to say, an individual could technically own all the three types of passports. However, not all are qualified for that. Okay. So these are the three types of passport that the Philippine government issue as well as the US government. They also issue the same passport. But of course, with the exemption of the official passport, because for them, official, there are some, I didn't, wala pa ako nakikitang official passport nila. Diplomatic, yes, but for the official, wala pa. So I'm not quite certain if the US government have the same arrangement with the official passport. But for the Philippines, it's three types. Okay. So we have the dark or the normal regular. So that's the usual passport that we have. The regular or the civilian passports that we have. Next is the red passport. That's the red. So red passport is the official passport. And we have the diplomatic passport, the color like light blue. Okay. For the US, they have the dark blue color. So that's the diplomatic passport. So a diplomatic passport is different from the official passport because it has or it contains or it ascertain your diplomatic immunity under the clause of the Vienna Convention for Diplomatic Relations. So there is a certain special privileges to the holder of the diplomatic passports. Okay. Para ano lang yan, di ba? Plate number natin. Pag plate number mo black, normal ka. Pag plate number mo is red, government property and vehicle. Pag plate number mo is blue, diplomatic. So kahit anong gawin mong traffic violation, pwede, di ba? So yun. Pag red, walang huli rin. Pero syempre, pwede multahan yung driver. Sa diplomatic, hindi mo pwedeng hulihin yung sasakyan, hindi mo pwedeng impound yun. Hindi mo rin pwedeng tikitan yung driver because diplomatic immunity. Okay? Now, going back, so what's the so wala pala akong, okay. So let me distinguish what's the privileges of the three different passports, no? Para malinaw tayo when we have the exam. The normal, of course, it attests two things. Yours, identity, and citizenship. So nothing more, nothing less. So it's just a regular passport. Official, it attests three things. Your identity, your citizenship, and it attests that you are an official or a official, either elected, career, or appointed official of the Philippine government. So mean to say, it has a certain special bearing whenever you apply for a visa. Kasi sa visa natin, if you're using the official passport, it's quite easy for you to have visa. Because literally the government is guaranteeing that you will go back to the Philippines again. Because of that guarantee, the foreign government is quite at ease of issuing a visa for you. Okay? So that's a logic there. Oops. What about the okay, for diplomatic sorry for that. For diplomatic passports, so aside that it showcase your individual identity, your nationality, and it attests that you are a official of the government, it also shows and attests that this person is part of the diplomatic corps of the Philippines, and therefore he is entitled with the special privileges of diplomatic immunity. So when you say diplomatic immunity, kahit pumatay ka na tao sa ibang bansa, you are not, I mean, the country won't prosecute you. However, there is a repercussion for your action. The country might expel you from their territories and revoke all the privileges and rights of other diplomats because of your case. So there are some cases nangyari na yan. So if you're having a diplomatic immunity, it's quite really a big privileges. Okay, talagang with plural yon, big privileges. Kasi marami talagang privilege yan. Hindi ka pwedeng kasuhan, biro mo kahit manampal ka ng tao doon. Dati may kwento sa akin before eh. Merong nanampal na diplomat, Filipino diplomat sa bandang Hong Kong. No, syempre aarestuhin. Syempre pinakita yung diplomatic passport. O syempre hindi maaresto ngayon. Diba? So may mga ganun. Kaya syempre, you know, that's special privileges, so hindi dapat abusuhin. Okay? So hindi ko na alam kung ano nangyari dun sa diplomat na yun. Okay? Now, of course, syempre diplomatic passport mo, hindi siya uubra pag nasa embassy ka kasi syempre Philippine, let's say, sinampal mo yung katulong mo, Pilipino yun, Pilipino ka, nasa nasa embassy kayo ng Philippines, Pilipinas yun, so pwede kang kasuhan. Okay? We're just talking here sa labas. Okay? Who is entitled for these passports? Okay. Regular passport, all Filipinos. As long as you're Filipinos, you are entitled for a regular passport. And mind you, the passport is not owned by you, it's owned by the states. So basically, nirerentahan mo lang siya sa states. The state can revoke your passport. Okay? Next, official. When you are a government employee, either as a career official, appointed official, or elected official. So may kasi hinalal ka ng bayan, official ka, let's say konsehal, mayor, official. Inappoint ka ni President Duterte, secretary, official yon. Or career public civil servant ka, so official siya. Now, ang premise dito is of course that should be used only for government service lang, government purposes, okay? Public purposes siya. Okay, so normally ay nakikita ko to for scholars, ganyan. For representative ng government sa other forum yan. So ito yung ginagamit. Kasi besides madali ang visa mo, exempted ka rin sa Philippine Travel Tax. So malaking bagay yan, di ba? You don't pay 1,620. Diplomatic, obviously yun siya. But who is entitled for this? Hindi lahat ng government official is entitled for diplomatic passport because the only one is the DFA, the Foreign Diplomat Corps, and of course, the immediate family of the President of the Philippines. So, ganun siya. So, mean kasi immediate family, no? But, sometimes they also do the extended family. So, upon the discretion of the President of the Philippines. Yan. Okay, let's move forward. Next, this one is uncommon for most country. This one is just nakakita ko nito parang tagal-tagal na, it's bibihira, isang beses ko lang siya nakita. It's what we call the children identity card. It is used for minors in Germany. Kasi yung logic dito, di ba? Yung face ng bata, ang bilis magbago. So of course, if you issue a passport that is valid for 10 years, yung picture niya as baby, lumaki na siya after 10 years, will not be, or lumalaki siya during those 10 years, will not be the same. So it's really, really illogical. So in sense, they use this child identity card, which is attached to the main passport, or there is a parang conjunction, may ticket number, I mean, meron siyang number na nakakonjoin na ito yung passport ng magulang niya. Okay, para makita mo kung kasama talaga yung magulang niya. Okay? Yan po. Next. Okay, these are other types of passport. But again, you should be wary, may mga restrictions din to. Okay, the first is what we call the laissez faire passer by United Nations. So this is parang equivalent of the diplomatic passport. Okay, so this one is entitled for those diplomatic corps ng United Nations. So when they are assuming official function. Next is the European laissez passer or laissez passer. Okay, so that's the pass. Okay, so nakakita na ba ako? Hindi pa, basically hindi pa ako nakakita. Interpol identity card. Ito, that's the Interpol identity card. But of course, this one should be in conjunction with a valid passport. So ito yung valid passport dapat. Again, recap. When you travel, you can use the following. You can have the passport, either the normal, official, diplomatic. Now, there are some countries that they don't have official. It's the diplomatic or the regular lang. For US, I'm not certain. But uncertain ko dyan, they have diplomatic. Okay. Next is the Kinderpasser card or children identity card. Okay, so this one is German siya. And you have the special passport issued by inter-organizational bodies such as United Nations and the European Union. And also we have the Interpol identity card, which should be used with a passport. Okay. So now let's say, could I travel abroad without a passport? So pwede naman. However, there are certain restrictions and conditions that you should be able to meet before you should be able to use this passport substitute documents. So these are the okay. So before pala yun. So guidelines natin, no? So whenever passport and equivalent documents must be used in international service, okay, international service refers to international travel. The passenger must hold a ticket valid for a travel from point of embarkation to specified destination. Meaning to say that the passenger should have a valid ticket for travel, okay? Now again, rule of thumb, if you're traveling abroad, at least 6 months in validity ng passport mo, or especially if you're going to US, because that's quite a hassle if you have a connecting flight. Okay? So baka hindi ka tanggapin dun sa connecting flight mo. Next, passport should not be mutilated or damaged, meaning to say there is a damage, the passport is somewhat tampered, the passport look destroyed or altered. Okay. So pag okay, let's say na-deny ako ng visa ko, or let's say namarkahan na ko, TNT, nahuli ako. Tapos syempre tinataka yung passport mo. Ikaw parang hindi ka masyado nakakaya sa ibang bansa. Ginupit mo yung page na yun. Hindi pwede yun. So it's not valid anymore. Okay? So any mutilation. Okay. Next. Pero syempre sa tunay na buhay naman, hindi mo naman ma-check na yun dahil hindi mo naman ginaganon talaga, di ba? So, pero pag nakita mo yun, dapat hindi ganun. Okay? Next. Ticket and passport name should be exactly the same. Yan. So yun tayo travel agent, number 1 rule yan. Ticket and passport name should be exactly the same. Okay. Let's go. Another thing is the passenger must hold a valid passport for all countries to or through. Okay, let's say for case of connecting flight, which she travel unless, number 1, there is an exemption in effect that allow the country concerned. For example, if you're a Hong Kong passport holder and you're traveling mainland China, there is a certain ID card system that they use that you might use it in okay, parang in equivalent to the passport. Okay, your normal Hong Kong passport. Okay, he passes to a country without leaving the airport. So yeah, so basically pwedeng gawin yan if you are not passing the country without leaving the airport. But logically, this one is quite impossible to do now these days. No, medyo talaga possible na to, especially for COVID. Okay, next. So what are those other documents that you can use in lieu of the passport? For example, most cases here is nawawala ang passport. So what can you do? So these are documents that might have the same legal effects as a passport, pero its usage is limited and it's only applied to certain special circumstances, and there are lots of restrictions. Okay, so of course hindi siya pwedeng gamitin as real substitute to the real thing, a passport. Okay, ginagamit lang siya because nawala nga yung passport mo, and there's the consulate cannot issue a passport for you because of that, in that regards, no. So ngayon, ito siya. Number 1, International Red Cross Emergency Passport. Okay. Now, if you're Ukrainian, let's say nasa Syria ka, kagera, of course, your documents are lost, probably your belongings are lost, and there's no way for you to have a means of a access to a passport issuing government agency. So wala talaga, di ba? So now, the Red Cross could issue parang a identity card. So we call it a Red Cross Emergency Passport or Red Cross ID. Red Cross ID or Red Cross Emergency Passport. So this is only to be used for refugees. Hindi ka pwedeng gumamit nito kung walang gera. Pag may gulo lang, refugees, no? So this is only valid for refugees. Okay, and of course, syempre, ayaw naman natin na makakita niyan dahil syempre, alam mo na, refugees, tao, kawawa naman. Okay, so next. This one is a travel certificate. A travel certificate is issued, valid for 30 days, and issued as one-way document to the Philippines. Hindi siya pwedeng outside the Philippines, ha? Okay, let's say na wala ako yung passport ko. I've been roaming around Shanghai and suddenly I forgot my passport at the toilet and there's no other means for me to retrieve the passport anymore. And I have tried my best to retrieve it. Of course, wala talaga. So what I'm going to do? I'm going to the nearest consulate in Shanghai and apply for a travel certificate. So in the application of the travel certificate, you need to prove yourself that you are Filipino. So pinakamagandang ebidensya dyan dahil may cellphone ka is to take picture of your passport. Now without that, you can show your any valid government ID. So of course, syempre mag-Tagalog ka. So that's the test dyan. So now if they have ascertained you that you are already a Filipino, without a doubt, they will issue a travel document. The travel document is valid for inbound flights only. Hindi siya pwedeng outbound, inbound. Meaning to say, going back to the Philippines. And after that, if you lost your passport, you have now to apply for a new passport under the category of loss. So for that, you need to have an incident, parang a sworn affidavit and a certified or parang sworn affidavit of loss annotated by the embassy or the embassy concerned in Shanghai. May ganun na sila. So, okay, wag po tayo magpapawala ng passport. Ang napakasakit sa ulo. Okay, may ganun. Next. Identity card. Ito yung sinasabi ko sa inyo sa Hong Kong. In lieu of the normal passport that the government of Hong Kong issue, because these are SARS, no, Special Administrative Region. Technically, they are part of China, but they have their different systems. So they are not really, they are China, but not really China at all. They are Hong Kong, part of China. So they have a different passport. Okay. So for that, inter-border travel, they use this permanent ID card. Yan. Para national ID nila. Okay. Next is for military ID for JOS, no? US GI JOS, yung ating military service. Pero this one is, wag kayong basta tumanggap ng military ID lang. Kasi ang daming nagpepeke niyan. Passport pa rin. Kasi the US servicemen and JOS natin, meron talaga silang bit-bit na passport with them, aside from the military ID. Okay. We only use the military ID to avail discounts. Pero to ascertain the identity, still the passport is the gold standard. Okay. Okay. So this is Seaman's discharge book. Okay. So para siyang passport, no? But without the passport, you cannot use the Seaman's identity book or Seaman's book lang. You need to have both. Bakit? Kasi yung Seaman's identity book natin, it's a record siya sa barko. Okay, meaning to say port. Now, yung passport mo, both yan, air and port or land. So, yun po yung kanyang implication. Okay? So, you cannot use Seaman's book lang. Kailangan with passport. Okay? Next. Okay. Let's go with a visa. So, what is a visa? Visa is a Latin, it comes from the Latin word that means to say that the paper was already seen or checked. So, basically, a visa is a document that is embedded or stamped at your passport. So you have your passport as the, let's say, notebook. I have a notebook. And your visa is something that I write as a guarantee that this person is the real thing. He is indeed the real thing, and this person is qualified to enter or exit our territory. Okay, so ganun siya. Again, visa is a document issued by a foreign government. Passport is a government issued by your own government. Okay. So meaning to say, if I'm a Filipino, my passport is a Filipino passport. And then if I'm applying for Japan or I'm going to travel to Japan, I need to have a Japanese visa, which is stamped in the passport. Okay, ganun siya. Now, visa, when you have the visa, it is presumed that the visa is valid for both entry and exit. Okay? Entry and exit. Now, hindi po lahat ng destination ganon. Especially sa Middle East. They have different entry and exit visa. So, meaning to say, when you enter their country, it's one visa. When where you're going to exit their country, you need to apply for a certain visa called exit visa. Without that, you cannot go out of Saudi Arabia. Okay? So that is for the practice of our OFW in Saudi. Okay. Now let's go. A visa contains the following information: a biodata, just like your passport, and of course, it should be the same. Same fingerprint, same retina scan for some cases, same details of your face. Okay. Validity and number of entry. Okay, for number of entry, we have three types. We have single entry, dual entry, and multiple entry. So pag single, isang beses, dual, dalawa. Pag multiple, bahala ka na. So maraming beses. And we have also restrictions. There are some certain restrictions. One of the restrictions that I may put in your US visa is that it's, let's say, it's only valid until ganitong date, or it's only valid in conjunction to a certain event. Parang ganon. So they're putting that restrictions, but it's kind of rare, rare siya. Nevertheless, if you have a medyo suspicious record sa kanila, they may put restrictions on your visa. Okay. So this one is a sample of my own personal visa. It's a US visa which I acquired during 2013. Age ko yata niya, nasa 26 yata ako. It's 27 or 20, 26. Okay. So, very young, no? So, when I apply a US visa, it's quite hard because ang daming na de-deny, nag-apply ako. And of course, the consul is, syempre, Amerikano, nagtatanong sa'yo. And there are lots of questions that they're going to ask to you. But you have to remain consistent, and you have to remain true to your answer. And of course, there should be a proof. Dapat may proof talaga. So yun. So luckily, I was granted a multiple entry visa. So that's the annotation here. So yan. Yung iba nagpapakamatay for US visa. Ako, actually, mas matagal ang pinila ko sa eleksyon kaysa sa US visa. Yan. So, multiple entry siya. So, if it's S, it means to say single. If it's D, dual. Okay? And of course, mind you, it's mag-expire na siya. So, kailangan ko na pumunta ng Amerika ulit. Sayang naman baka di ko magamit. Kasi nga, di ba lockdown pa yan. So yun. So it's valid for 10 years. So biro mo 2013, mag-expire siya 2023. So ito siya, no? If I didn't use this visa for 10 years, baka hindi na ako mabigyan ng visa. And luckily, I have used this visa. So I'm planning to use it next year or this year. So once everything's okay na, so punta tayo ulit. And of course, mahal siya, no? 10,000 yung gastos ko dyan plus yung other services ko. So medyo kailangan sulitin yan. Okay? So category type ko, may category type siya is B1, B2, which is a tourist visa. Okay? Next. Okay. What are the types of visas? Okay. So visas are normally arranged or clustered into two major categories. So we have the immigrant visa and non-immigrant visa. So when you say immigrant visa, you are permanently migrating to that country. Example is Canada. If you have a migrant visa or immigrant visa granted to you into your Philippine passport, so you cannot go back to the country sa Pilipinas for about 3 years. Kailangan mo siya ma-serve until such time that the Canadian government grants you full citizenship. So ganun, no? Now, if you're not planning to stay in that country for good or for permanent, we have non-immigrant visa, which under that, ito yung major concern natin, no? Kasi pag immigrant visa ka, ang issue ticket sa'yo one way. Pag non-immigrant visa, round trip yan. Okay, most cases. Okay, we have the tourist, trader, student, and working visa. And mind you, merong isang country ang pangalan is Egypt. Wala silang tourist visa. So, ang ini-issue sa'yo is student visa. So, huwag ka na magtaka kung bakit in-issue sa'yo is student visa. Hindi siya tourist visa. Wala kasi silang category tourist visa. Dati yun, ha. I don't know if they have already evolved. Baka meron na. Okay? Kasi may ganun mga country before, no? Parang student and tourist is parang isang cluster sa kanila. Anyway, so in general, ito po yung mga category natin. Tourist, trader, student, and working visa. Okay. Now, balikan ko pala. Sir, ano ba yung different ng mga visa na yan? Siyempre, different niyan. Siyempre, pag tanong niyo ako, different purpose, different visa. Diba? Number one, permanent. Gusto mo pala magstay na doon for life, the immigrant visa ka, tapos round trip ticket ka, hindi pwede yun. So, madi-deny ka. Hindi ka, question ka, diba? Tourist visa one way, hindi pwede yun. Kasi nga, hindi ka naman for good doon eh, diba? So, dapat round trip. So, ano ba yung difference ng tourist sa student, sa working visa, vice versa? Okay. Ito bin according sa nature of work mo, no? So let's say you are a tourist, mamamasyal ka lang, hindi ka raraket doon, okay? Hindi ka magtatrabaho doon sa country mo. So you have your own means of supporting yourself while enjoying the beautiful sceneries of that country. Trader naman, trader and tourist, either which lang yan, nagpapalit-palit lang yan, okay? So trader, main purpose naman niya is to do business. But of course, they can bypass that as easy as a tourist. Kasi wala naman talaga masyadong restrictions dyan. Student, yan, you have to secure a certain credentials from the university na mag-aaral ka. Meron ka talagang proof dyan. O working ganun din. You have to show employment contract. Tawag nila, deployment contract or employment contract sa country nila. Yan. So, yan siya. So, another thing is, of course, syempre may mga discounts siya sa Philippine Travel Tax. Yung student and working visa, reduced Philippine Travel Tax siya. So, meaning to say, they don't pay the full 1,620. Okay, they pay a certain amount lang for case of OFW for waiving. For the case of the student is the reduced travel tax. Okay, so instead of 1,620, that's 750 plus 300 for the processing of your certificate. Yan. Kung may time kayo, pero ako, wag na, magbayad na lang ako. Wala akong time pumunta dyan sa Makati. Okay? Next. We have also other forms of visas that might be some sort of a visa. Okay. Bakit? Visa upon arrival, ito yung ginagawa sa mga Chinese. So when they come here in the Philippines. So tatatakan natin, ascertain natin if that Chinese is fit for travel in the Philippines and the country is that Chinese is okay. So i-issue natin siya ng visa upon their arrival here. So yung ganun rin ang practice sa ibang bansa. For India, ganun din tayo. When I go to India, yung Indian consulate dyan, mag-i-issue sa akin ng visa upon arrival. So doon ko naayos yung pagdating ko. Now, for Australia, they have electronic travel authorities. Australia to. So pupunta ako doon sa isang website, mag-apply ako, log into yung mga information ko, and then they will issue a certain code or document na electronic travel authority siya. Okay? And then, of course, I have to print it para may ebidensya ako. Okay? That is valid for Australia. Now, next is the visa waiver program practiced before by Taiwan, but not anymore. Kasi part pa rin tayo. No? But before, this visa waiver program is practiced by Taiwan. Now, if you have US, Japan, European, ano pa? Basta US, Japan, European, you are exempted of applying, or you're exempted in you're not required to get the Chinese Taipei visa. So, ganun siya. So, pwede ka na pumunta ng Taiwan nang walang visa. But ngayon, syempre pwede ka na pumunta ng Taiwan kasi we have a special arrangement for them. Okay? So, that's okay. So now, these are the countries that only no visa tayo. So, meaning to say, just show your valid passport for 6 months and you go to travel. So, these are the destinations. So, Taiwan, and I think it was extended kasi nga because of COVID, diba? So I think lang ha, I'm not sure pa kasi wait for their notification. Okay? Singapore, yan. So these are consistent. Okay? Next. Israel, 90 days tayo, 'di ba? Israel. Bakit? Salamat kay Manuel L. Quezon because Manuel L. Quezon was the first among the world leader to respond and help the Jewish to flee from the persecution nila sa Nazi. So because of that, we have established a good relationship with Israel. So yeah, 90 days tayo, walang visa. Mongolia, yan, 21 days, wala. Okay. We have also for Thailand, yan, ASEAN kasi. Okay, any ASEAN countries. Ito, Vanuatu. So Vanuatu in certain island in the Pacific, but of course, ba tayo pupunta dyan? Diba? Hirap pumalap ng flight. Next. Yeah. These are the South American countries. Okay. Rwanda, Africa, diba? Yeah. Okay. Now, of course, syempre, hindi naman natin alam lahat ng mga visa requirement, and some of them might also require you other forms of requirements such as yung health declaration, visa, besides the visa, maritime vaccine certificate, etc. So para matulungan kayo, meron akong website na i-share. Ang pangalan niya is Ayata Thematics. So, ang gagawin nyo lang dito is of course input yung passenger details ng kliyente nyo para malaman ninyo kung ano yung kailangan nating dokumento. Okay. So, yun siya. So, yan. Input nyo siya. So, syempre, kailangan input nyo yung passport nationality ng pasahero nyo, tapos saan siya pupunta, saan siya galing, etc. So, para lumabas siya. Okay? Or, kung may access kayo, let's say you are now a travel agent na kayo sa agency, so you can easily access the thematic functions at ating GDS by encoding the key. Yan. Next. Okay. So aside from the visa, we have this, of course, because of the global pandemic, we have this other requirements. Ngayon, valid ngayon is COVID ID. Ngayon, kung wala, syempre COVID ID, yung proposal, pero kung wala niyan, at least valid IPCR test taken within last 24 hours. Tapos magne-negative ka dun sa ating antigen test. Yan. And of course, your vaccine certificate, yung vaccine ID nyo. Should be, of course, yung vaccine ID nyo should be uniform to the uniform to the standard practiced by ICAO. And also, nag-i-issue nin is yung Bureau of Quarantine. Yan, sila yung nag-i-issue ng IT. Next is, of course, the traditional, we have the cholera, malaria, and smallpox vaccination certificates. Okay. So this one is yung mga lugar na pupuntahan nyo, very prone from cholera. So may inoculation kayo. Kailangan nyo magpabakuna. Okay. Next. If you're accompanying minor, when we're talking about minor, these are 18 years old and below. These are 18 years old and below because these are considered as minor. No. So in the absence of a parent, let's say hindi kasama yung mama, hindi kasama yung tatay. Pero kung kasama yung tatay, okay na yon. Kasama nanay, okay na rin yon. Pero kung wala yon, kasama lang po yung ating lola, auntie, ganyan. So you need to secure a DSW clearance. Okay. So DSW clearance, you have to go to the DSWD website, check the requirement, and of course, apply kayo doon. This aims to protect the child from human trafficking. So they want to ascertain that this minor is indeed mapoprotektahan siya. Okay? Kasi syempre, you're traveling abroad, diba? Baka mamaya kung anong gawin niyo sa bata. Okay? Next. Okay. This one is quite a special. Okay. So ito naman, iba naman to. Now, if you're bringing out, let's say, any painting, ako, a person happens to me, no? I'm the one who process this document. Okay. So when you're traveling and you're going to bring out painting, of course, you need to declare it because that's part of the declarables, no? So any painting, no, kahit hindi siya national artist painting. Pag national artist kasi, national artist painting siya. For example, pinaint siya ni Bencab, pinaint siya ni Amorsolo, pinaint siya ni kung sino yung mga masters natin. Malamang di mo malalabas yun kasi hindi ka bibigyan ng certificate of non-coverage. So mean to say that your painting should remain in the Philippines. Ganun siya. May special permit tayo doon. Special permit, pwede mo naman siya mailabas, kaso naman special permit na kailangan may assurance na ibabalik yung painting na yan papunta sa Philippines. So this aims to protect all artworks antique and of course, the protection of our natural and cultural heritage. Okay. So kailangan mag-secure na Certificate of Non-Coverage sa National Commission for the Culture and the Arts. Yan. So may picture tayo and then pangalan ng artist. Yan. So, okay. So that's it. I think I have discussed all the necessary things for this lesson. No? Recap lang natin para ganda yung ating pagsasamahan. Okay, may recap tayo. Okay. Recap purposes, no? So in lesson natin we discuss about travel documents. So you have basically why you should pay attention. Number one, as a passenger might experience lots of inconvenience. Number two, the airline might suffer from infringement, penalty, and impounding of their aircraft. And as a travel agent, possible ka mademanda kasi nga you didn't advise your client well. As a PSA, yun nga, possible ka matanggal sa work mo because of that. Okay. So travel document centers in two things. Okay. Mostly passport and visa. Passport is, there are generally three types of passport that we issue in the Philippines. We have the regular, the official, and the diplomatic. And of course, the more diplomatic does not require any visa. Official requires certain amount of visa, but of relaxed requirements. And of course, if we have a regular passport, of course, the full maximum requirements natin. Diplomatic, you don't need to have a visa because you have a diplomatic privileges. Any country that recognize our diplomatic relationship, yun siya. Granted na yun. So hindi mo na kailangan mag-apply pa ng visa kasi diplomatic passport ka. Okay. Now, in case that there are certain circumstances na nawala yung passport or there are wars, okay, there are substitute documents such as Red Cross ID or Red Cross Emergency Identification Card, which of course could be used, but for refugee only. Next is if you lost your passport, the consulate could issue a travel certificate. So that is only valid going in or inside the Philippines, not out the Philippines. Okay. Next is a visa. Visa is the document that we emboss or stamp sa passport. Now, the purpose of the visa is to make sure that the client or the passenger is already qualified, or that passenger is safe or admissible for the entry in our territories. Now, visa is issued by a foreign government, so it's a privilege. So technically, they don't have to explain anything to you when they reject your application. So let's say if a certain individual was not given the U.S. visa, they cannot sue the U.S. consulate for that, because that's the prerogative, and that's a privilege on your part. Their prerogative. Okay? They don't see that you are fit in traveling to the U.S. territory. Now, there are different types of visa, but majorly it clusters into two things. So we have the immigrant and non-immigrant. So immigrant, you stay for long or permanent. Non-immigrant, it falls under the category of tourist, student, working, and traders. So, and finally, there are other documents besides the passport and visa that might be required because of certain circumstances. For example, is when you're traveling with minor. Example, when you are exposing yourself to a certain area that is known for cholera, hepatitis, etc., vaccination certificate is being required. Now, nowadays, because of COVID pandemic, of course, meron tayong restrictions for IPCR test, and of course a valid back certificate. So that is a requirement. Lastly, we have the DSW permit when you are going out with minor, and if you're going out with a painting or any artwork in your baggage, so you should be able to show the NCCA certificate of non-coverage for that work of art. So that's it. So that's basically covers everything. So now we will have a new lesson for more about this area, travel and tourism. So keep in touch now. Okay. If you have question, please feel free to ask question in our comment box. Thank you.